Be me. 24 and from Ontario, Canada. I recently had a cousin on my mother's side of the family pass away. He was 26. I only ever met him a couple times in my life. He lived a couple provinces away from me, in Alberta, so that's why. For the Americans reading this, provinces are like states. My cousin lived alone and no one found his body for a week. His close family was very distraught, of course. My mother suggested we go out there to be supportive during this trying time. I was between jobs at the time, so I agreed. My cousin's mother and father met us in the airport. His mom had tears in her eyes and a heavily used handkerchief in her hands. As I approached, memories of these two sprung up like flowers in my mind. I remembered their faces at a barbecue and a funeral when I was young. What was once an obscure part of my memory had jumped to the forefront. It all became so clear and I wondered how I could have ever forgotten them in the first place. My mother took a guest room in her sister's house and I was set up in a cheap motel room. It wasn't the nicest place in the world, but I was glad to have a bit of solitude. The next day we started cleaning out my cousin's house. It wasn't a very big place. Not a trailer, but not a big house either. His body was already taken away, obviously, but a pretty putrid smell remained. I disassembled his computer and desk. My uncle cleaned up some trash. We boxed up his worldly possessions and bagged his clothes. I was tasked with going through a small attic for anything of interest. There were some old family albums. Pictures from times long gone. I flipped through them. Scattered through the pages were old Polaroids and prints from disposable cameras. Family events from across the ages. Christmases that date themselves by their presents. Halloweens by their costumes. An N64 here and a Luke Skywalker costumes there. As I went through someone else's nostalgic memories, I noticed something strange. In the background of some of the photos was a consistent, although subtle, shadow. It loomed over the photos it appeared in, their atmospheres tainted by its inclusion. The shadow gave me the impression that just milliseconds before the photo was taken, some great tragedy had taken place which no one had time to react to. Buried in the first album was a Polaroid of my cousin's first birthday. He looked so happy and innocent, smiling at his cake and surrounded by loving family. But still, looming over him was that shadow. It stifled the blue of his eyes. I took it and the rest of the albums down with me. The others were reminiscing about old times with my cousin. Telling each other stories and showing off old toys and birthday cards that he kept over the years. When he was 4, he had to go to the hospital for asthma and they gave him a stuffed teddy bear. He kept it all these years. I put the photo albums in my backpack. I said I was going to make a collage of my cousin's life. My mom told me that it was a wonderful idea. We exchanged hugs and I parted ways with them. In my motel room, I went through the rest of the albums. I saw my dead cousin's life play out one cherished memory at a time. His first time riding a bike. Losing his first tooth. His first music lesson. Occasionally, the shadow would be present. Everything changed after my cousin's 7th birthday. The shadow was more prominent. It has a face. A frightening toothy grin. It became fleshed out with gnarly red skin covered in burns and open sores. Its mouth housed a wicked pointed tongue. Its yellow eyes seemed to pierce through the photograph and look directly at me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This horrible beast was there with my family. As they posed for group pictures, the monster would be there, standing behind them, as if to taunt whoever looked at him. Just as when he was a shadow, no one in the photos seemed to notice him. They would smile and wave at the camera with a hellish specter standing next to them. I shook with fear as I went through the photos. The only person who seemed aware of the demon was my cousin. While everyone else smiled, he looked uncomfortable and afraid. He knew of the demon present in the pictures. I couldn't sleep that night. The next morning I went back to my cousin's house with some of the demon photos. I was going to ask what the hell it all meant. How was it possible that no one noticed the demon when the photos were taken? The first person I showed was my uncle. He raised his eyebrow in skepticism and looked at me with a knowing half-smile, as if I were playing a joke on him. He tells me that he doesn't really see what I mean. He takes the photo and holds it up to his bespectacled face, scrutinizing it for detail. "Is this one of those orb things?" he asks. "It's probably just dust in the air or a lens flare or something." How does he not see the demon smiling at the camera? It's plain as day. He tells me it's insensitive to go around joking about ghosts and phantoms at a time like this, especially with an old photo of my cousin. He thoroughly shames me. I ask my aunt about the photo next. She was one of the people in it, so I figured she must know something. She laughs and looks at me like I have a screw loose. My uncle is a room over, talking quietly with my mother. They are both glancing over me. I start to feel very uncomfortable. My aunt tells me that I'm being completely ridiculous. She explains that the demon is my Uncle Louis. My uncle and mother enter the room. They seemed concerned. They ask me to point out very clearly on the picture where I see a ghost. I lay the pictures out onto the kitchen table. I point out the obvious malevolence in them. My uncle very angrily tells me that the demon is my Uncle Louis. He says that if I'm playing some kind of cruel joke, to cut it out now. I'm upsetting my aunt and mother. He pockets the photos. I have one photo left in my hands. I scream while holding it up to them, "Look at how scared he is. He sees the demon. Why don't you?" Things break down and my uncle grabs me by the collar. My aunt starts crying. He lifts me and shoves me backwards. I shove back. My mother screams. I leave the house and go to my rented car. My uncle follows me outside, saying he'd call the cops because I assaulted him. I go to my motel room. I lock the door and shut the curtains. I sit down and stare at the box of albums on my bed for what feels like hours. My tired trance is broken when my mother calls me. She wants to explain things and make it better. My uncle wants to apologize for getting physical. Turns out he didn't end up calling the police after all. I hang up. She calls again. I ignore it. She calls my motel room directly and leaves a message. I play it. She says that she and my aunt are coming to get me to straighten things out. I panic. I take the albums and my suitcase to the motel office and check out. I then check into a different room and move my things there. I tell the woman at the front desk that should anyone come looking for me, I am not to be disturbed. She reassures me that it is their policy to never give out information on guests. I thank her. After bringing my rental around to the other side of the building, I enter my new motel room, lock the door. I keep the blinds closed and the lights off. I wait with bated breath in the darkness. After a few agonizing minutes, I hear my mother knock on my old motel room door. She calls out to me. I don't answer, of course. The two of them start to bang on the door. My aunt is getting angry with me for not answering. After 5 or so minutes of knocking, they leave. I later learned that they went to the front desk and asked for a key to the room. 10 minutes after that I got another voicemail from my mom, pleading with me to call her. She says she wants to know that I am safe. I hear my aunt deep in the background comment, probably to my uncle, that I'm a little jerk. I sink to the floor. I don't know what to do. I take the opportunity to catch up on my lost sleep. The next couple days I spent gathering evidence. I went through every single photo and searched for every last appearance of the demon. He was in nearly 75 of the few hundred photographs. I showed the most damning of the photos with the woman at the front desk. I didn't influence her. Just asked what she thought was happening in the photo. She looked confused. She said it's just a normal photo of a birthday or something. My heart sank and I thanked her for her time. With an eyebrow raised, she said you're welcome and went about her business. That night, I pored over the photographs. What were people seeing that I couldn't? Why was my perception so much different from everyone else's? As I searched for a meaning in the decrepit old Polaroids, I noticed a small detail. My cousin used to keep a journal. It was a kid's journal with some cartoon character on the front. In my sleep-deprived brain, I knew that that journal had the answers I wanted. At 2 in the morning, I went back to my cousin's house. There was a window that thankfully wasn't locked. With the flashlight on my phone, I searched through the boxes of my cousin's things. Every little sound I made seemed to echo loudly through the house and down the street. After 10 minutes of searching, I found the journal and fled the scene with it. Back in my motel room, I read through the journal. Scribbled with the handwriting of a child were first-hand accounts of horrors I could barely even comprehend. It brought me to tears. This demon would taunt and torment my cousin. He describes in great detail his fear and excruciating pain. I can hardly stomach it. I bet hardened police officers couldn't handle it. The demon would scorch my cousin with flames hot enough to melt iron. He would plead for help, but no one ever seemed to hear him. When he was alone at night, he could feel the flames spreading through the folds and crevices of his brain. He endured pure agony at the hands of the demon. I sobbed like a baby for my cousin. The next morning I woke up suddenly to the sound of my motel room phone ringing. I pick it up. It's my mother. She tells me that they all know what I did. I unlawfully entered my cousin's house and likely stole something that didn't belong to me. Given my recent behavior, she and the rest of my family believe it might be in my best interest to be institutionalized. Apparently they could do that because of some mental health law called 5150. She tells me that she's only doing this because she loves me and is concerned for my well-being. She says it's not normal to see demons in photographs. She gives me an ultimatum. Either be examined and held against my will, or meet Uncle Louis for myself. If I meet him in real life, I'll see that he isn't the monster I think he is. I reluctantly agree. She says that she's waiting for me downstairs. I hide several photos and the journal under my mattress. As I leave the room, I lock the door and ditch the key under a nearby vending machine. I didn't want my family taking it from me later. I meet my mom in the parking lot. She explains that once they realized what I'd done, they figured I was still in the area. Maybe even in the same motel. When she saw my rental car in the parking lot, that confirmed her suspicion. She started calling each room until she found mine. She hugs me. Says that everything will be okay. She takes me to my aunt and uncle's house. There are some extra cars out front. It's the day of my cousin's funeral and this is where everyone is meeting up. I enter and everyone looks at me. My uncle tries to apologize. I ignore him and sit in silence at the kitchen table. The atmosphere in the house is cheery, for the most part. People who don't get to see each other often are catching up. The next generation run through the house. After an hour or so, my aunt rushes into the kitchen and says, "He's here," to my mom. Uncle Louis has arrived. I'm on the edge of my seat. My breathing quickens as I hear the front door open and shut. Some distant relatives happily greet Uncle Louis down the hall. My mother holds my hand. After a few stomach-turning moments, Uncle Louis enters the room. He looks completely normal. He's middle-aged with glasses and light brown hair, fading away in baldness. He's wearing a company jacket of some kind. It has a transport truck logo on the front. He extends his hand for a shake. "I'm your Uncle Louis, it's great to finally meet you." I don't move a muscle. I know what he is. The house is dead silent. Even the children have stopped playing. Uncle Louis sits across from me. A charming smile slithers across his undeterred face. He tells me that it's a pleasure to meet me after all these years and that he's glad to have such a handsome nephew. He laments that he means to visit Ontario more often, but his work prevents him. He is a silver-tongued devil. Uncle Louis's wife enters the room. I glance at her. I've never seen eyes as dead as hers. Uncle Louis suggests that everyone else leave the room. It seems he wants to face the elephant. Everyone else leaves. My mom gives my hand one last squeeze before she lets go and follows everyone else. "I heard you're confused about me. I just wanted to clear things up." I shift uncomfortably in my chair. "You said I'm some kind of monster." "Well, I'm sure you can see that I'm just a normal guy." He smiles and laughs. "I've got a great wife and 2 kids that I'm very proud of. I'm not this monster that you think I am." He pulls out one of the photos from his pocket. "Do you really think I look like some kind of demon in this?" The picture clearly shows a demon, mouth open wide with sharp teeth and blood dripping from its lips. Its hand reaching down and holding my cousin's shoulder. If you need to know a little more about me, I volunteer at the church every weekend. His face shifts to sadness. Whenever someone in the community needs a hand, I'm always there. He laughs and says I can't count the number of times I've helped people move, let me tell you. His laughter stops. So for you to go around calling me a demon from hell. Well, it really hurts. I mean, you don't even know me. I stay silent. I haven't done anything wrong. My aunt storms back in the kitchen and screams at me, saying that Uncle Louis is a great man and that I should be apologizing for speaking such ugly lies about him. Uncle Louis tries to calm her down. More people come in. They tell me that Uncle Louis has a family that depend on him. Kids. What I'm saying about him could ruin that family. Uncle Louis tells me it's okay to make mistakes. He's made his fair share in life. He asks me for the photos and reminds me that there must be a mistake. Everyone in the room, save for Uncle Louis, is glaring at me. I remind myself that my cousin is dead now and that there is nothing I can do for him. I lower my head in shame and tell Uncle Louis where the photos are. He nods and smiles. I explain that I hid the key to my motel room and give its whereabouts to him. I also reveal the location of the journal. Uncle Louis asks my other uncle if he could go get the stuff. My other uncle leaves without a word. Uncle Louis stands and looks at his watch. Would you look at the time? He says. The funeral is starting soon. We need to get going if we don't want to be late. I stand up. Uncle Louis wraps his arm around my shoulder and gives me an affectionate pat. We attend my cousin's funeral together, I, his complicit prisoner.